So I would like to ask you a question and share my dilemma with you. As some of you know, over the last almost 2.5 months, I've been working with Ukrainian refugees, helping people with practical and financial help. And I co-chair a foundation that managed to fundraise a significant amount of money. And we work with a network of progressive communities in Europe and Israel and support their tireless efforts to help people fleeing from war. The scale of our work includes countries like Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Germany, UK, Israel. And it is important for me to say that we support both Jews and non-Jews. However, the Jewish origin of our work and our charity, because this is the World Union for Progressive Judaism and European Union for Progressive Judaism, it means that proportionately, Jews know about it and access the support more than non-Jews. And having been to Poland myself, I can say that being a refugee is a tragedy, but being a Jewish refugee makes this traumatic experience a little bit better and more comfortable. For historical reasons, Jewish people are more likely to have friends and relatives in other countries, but also because of Jewish organizations, you get access to more options of immigration and refugee shelters. In addition to that, Germany and Israel have special programs for Ukrainian immigration, for Jewish immigration, in addition to the existing support for Ukrainian refugees. So my question is it fair? Do Jewish communities need to be more proactive in reaching out to all refugees and ensure the proportional representation of all people who receive support? Again, there's all these charities I know, all Jewish charities I know, support both Jews and non-Jews, but Jews know about it. More Jews know about it. A more general question is how universal a Jewish community should be and how to find the balance between being unique, being proud for being different from others, and keeping your people separate and being universally oriented, being a part of a wider society. I think that a very similar question and a theme is at the core of this week's Torah portion. It begins with discussing the purity of Jewish priests. It includes prohibition for Kohanim to intermarry and even to marry a convert. The parasha ends with the story about fight between a man with an Israelite mother and Egyptian father, and a man whose both parents are Israelites. So, Vayetze ben Isha Israelit, vehu ben Ish Mitzri mitoch bnei Israel. So there came among the Israelites, a man whose mother was Israelite and whose father was Egyptian, and a fight broke out in the camp between that son of an Israelite woman and a certain Israelite. So the name of this person is not given. We only know a few details about this person, that his parents. We know the details about his parents, that he is a son of Israelite mother and an Egyptian father. And remember the background, they just came out from Egypt, from the house of slavery. So does the Torah portion hint us about this kind of dark side of this person who is not totally loyal to us or something? So let's see. The son of the Israelite woman pronounced the name in blasphemy, and he was brought to Moses. His mother's name was Shlomit, and daughter of Dibri of the tribe of Dan. So why would his origin matter so much? Why is he not named? Why are we told that his mother is an Israelite and his father is an Egyptian? So in her book, the book is entitled Leviticus as Literature. Mary Douglas suggested that this passage is indeed indeed the entire book of Leviticus is not just the list of laws. And we heard some of the laws. You have to do this, you have to do that. It's not just the list of laws, but a carefully constructed and edited text. Each law is tested, illustrated by many examples, and nuances presented to the reader by presenting us with real-life cases. So the law is given, but here you are, the real-life case. How do you solve this? So Douglas suggests that the names in this story play an important role. The man's mother is Shlomit, which comes from the same root in Hebrew as the root leshalem, to pay or to repay or retribute. Her father was Dibri, which comes from the word dibur, like Aseret Dibrot, 10 Commandments, which can be literally translated from Hebrew as 10 sayings or 10 utterances. But for simplicity, I will use the word commandment here. So her father's name was something to do with commandment. It's a pan to do with commandment. We also know that he was of the tribe of Dan, which alludes to the Hebrew word court, din, or judgment. Therefore, all names in this story are carefully chosen and meaningful. This makes this character not a real person, but a metaphor, a literary tool to present a lesson or illustrate an aspect of the law. Reading this Torah passage from this angle might explain why this man has no name. He is not a real person, but an illustration or a test to the law, precedent. There is another peculiar choice of words in this passage. The verb for saying God's name is in blasphemy is vayikov. This is not the most frequently used word in Torah. It is used, but not very often. There are other words that can express the same. Its original meaning is to pierce or to make a hole. But it is also sometimes used in the context of cursing or blasphemy. So later, when the verdict was given, the man was sentenced to be stoned to death. This is an unusual decision. The death sentence was not given on account of words, of speech before. There were other punishments, but not death. It seems extreme. Only for actions or disobeying the law that the death sentence was given before. So the word for stoning here is veragmu. Again, not the first choice of word that would be used in this context. Its original meaning is to throw something, sometimes to stone, because you throw stones, but a rare meaning of this verb is again to curse. And maybe Mary Douglas suggests that perhaps this is intentional. So this wordplay is intentional and deliberate. The two words are carefully chosen to illustrate the Jewish principle, measure for measure. You curse something with words, therefore you shall be cursed with stones. Perhaps this story can be translated in the following way. I took a poetic license, and this is a very free translation, but it emphasizes these words. Once there was a man with no name, son of retribution, grandson of commandment, from the house of judgment, and he threw insults and cursed the name. And the Eternal One said, he threw insults at my name, and people who heard him shall throw stones at him. So this story is a grotesque. This story is an illustration. This story is not teaching the letter of the law, but making an illustration of the law and the principle measure for measure. As if, and maybe it is a deliberate exaggeration to show, is that what we mean? Is it really true that should we do that? As if it's a coincidence, immediately after this story, we read the repetition of this law. Shever tachat shever, ein tachat ein. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. This is again not the first time we have known this formula, both in the Torah and in the history of humanity. The famous Code of Hammurabi, ancient Babylonian legal text composed in 18th century before the Common Era, had a very similar principle. If a man destroyed the eye of another man, they were to destroy his eye. So far, the same as the Torah. If one broke a man's bone, they were to break his bone. However, if one destroyed the eye or broke the bone of an ordinary person, he was to pay monetary compensation in silver, according to Hammurabi Code. If one destroyed the eye of a slave or broke a bone of a slave, he was to pay 1/2 the slave's price, again according to Hammurabi Code. If a man knocked out a tooth of a man of his rank, they were to knock out his tooth. So perhaps this Torah passage we read today is not just a text and law, but a debate with Hammurabi, with other laws that surround us, in the that used to surround us. According to the Torah, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, fracture for fracture, is the principle equal for all people, regardless of their social class, origin, income, and position. Just as this is not the first time we've read this formula in the history of humanity, so it's not the first time we've read this in the Torah. So this time, however, it is written, and we hear an important clarification about this principle, that this law should be applied to anybody, be it a stranger or a citizen. In this context, a person whose mother was an Israelite and father was Egyptian should be treated in the same way as the person whose both parents are Israelites. And it is to do with the law, with demands that we do that we ask from this person, and for the rights. So perhaps this Jewish principle can be understood very simply. When you apply the law to your citizens, you need to do the same to others. The equality of the law seems obvious, but it wasn't always the case in the past, and it's not always the case now. It's easy to demand justice from strangers whose position in society is weak, but the moment you make the case about equality in all the demands, you need to give equality in rights too. In other words, the equality can be understood in this way. When you ask something from strangers, you should ask yourself, would it be fair if instead of them, there was somebody I know, one of my friends, one of my relatives, somebody I can associate myself with? If your answer is yes, I would do the same to my friend, then this law is just and fair. If not, you are biased. There are many examples of such questions in the modern world. And would it be fair if somebody you know was refused a refugee status in Israel, for example, because they are not Jewish enough or not Jewish at all? We can continue this list for a long time. There are many applications of this principle today. Let's try to apply this principle to my initial question. Would I feel bad if I knew that somebody received some extra help and support more than a person I know, because the person I know simply didn't know about it, had no knowledge? Most likely I wouldn't mind. I would be happy for them and grateful that there are people who provide support. But would I feel bad if a person I know would be refused support based on their religious identity or the lack of Jewish ancestry? Most certainly, yes. I would. And I would feel that there is an injustice in this world that should be addressed. Perhaps equality is not always about actively achieving something, doing something, but about not denying equal treatment to others when they approach. This is why the Jewish principle is not that you should do to others what you want to be done to you, but that which is hateful to you, do not do to others. That is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Shabbat Shalom.